The alien princess was born under the twin suns of a dying world. Her first cry was weaker than other children, and her skin carried a mark that the elders did not understand. To her father, the great king, she was still his daughter, but to her stepmother, she was a mistake, a flaw in the royal bloodline. The court whispered behind closed doors, calling her cursed, calling her unfit. Every day of her young life she felt the stares, the cold words, the heavy silence, but she endured, keeping her head high, for deep inside she carried a spark, a hope she could not explain. When the king died, everything changed. Her stepmother seized the throne with cruel hands. The princess was stripped of her title, her name erased from the songs. The people were told she was unworthy, a danger to the kingdom, and one night, under the cold moons, she was cast out into the wastelands. The wastelands were endless, a desert of black sand and broken stones. Jagged towers of crystal rose like claws from the ground, sharp and merciless. The air was dry and heavy, burning her throat with every breath. No one survived long out here, not without weapons, not without water. But she was determined to live, because she refused to let her stepmother's cruelty be the end of her story. Days passed, and the sun scorched her skin. Nights were worse, cold winds cutting through her thin robes. She searched for shelter in caves, for water in deep cracks of stone. Her stomach ached with hunger, her lips cracked with thirst, but still she walked, step after step, her eyes filled with silent fire. Strange shadows followed her at night. She could hear claws scratching against the sand, eyes glowing from the darkness, watching her every move. She knew the wastelands were full of beasts that fed on the lost. But she kept moving, clutching a shard of crystal she had found, using it as her only weapon. One evening, when the suns began to fall, the ground shook beneath her feet. A monstrous creature emerged from the sand, its body long and armored like a serpent. Its mouth split into 4 rows of teeth dripping with poison. It hissed, circling her, ready to strike. The princess froze, fear gripping her heart. She raised her crystal shard. Though she knew it would not be enough, the beast lunged, its jaws wide. She leapt aside, rolling in the sand, the shard cutting across its thick hide. The monster shrieked, enraged, striking again with blinding speed. Her arms ached, her breath short. She stumbled and fell. The creature loomed above her, victory in its cruel eyes. In that desperate moment, she felt her strength fading. For the first time, doubt whispered inside her mind. Maybe the court was right. Maybe she was flawed. Maybe this was the end. But then, out of the swirling dust, a sound echoed, not the roar of a beast, but the sharp crack of metal against scale. The serpent screamed in pain, twisting away from her. She blinked, struggling to see through the storm of sand. There he was, a figure unlike any she had ever seen. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in worn armor that carried scars of many battles. In his hands he held a weapon glowing with strange light. A human, a traveler from the stars. He stood between her and the beast, fearless. The serpent lunged again, but he moved with speed and skill. His weapon cut through its armor, sparks flying. The ground trembled with every strike, until the creature shrieked one last time and fell, its body sinking back into the sand. Silence followed, heavy and endless. The princess stared at the human, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. She had never seen his kind before, yet something in his eyes was familiar. Strength, yes, but also something more, compassion. He turned to her, his voice calm but strong. "You're hurt," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated, staring at the rough lines of his palm. She had been betrayed so many times, cast out, abandoned. But in his hand there was no cruelty, only honesty. Slowly, she reached for him, her fingers trembling, and when he pulled her up for the first time since her exile, she felt safe. Not saved. Not yet, but safe. She did not know his name, nor why he had come, but in her heart she felt it. Her story was not ending here. It was only beginning. ***The wasteland stretched far beyond the princess's eyes. Endless waves of black sand and broken stones. Beside her now walked the human, his step steady, his presence strong. He carried weapons she had never seen before, glowing tools of war that looked both ancient and advanced. She had questions, many questions, but the words refused to come. Her throat was dry, her pride wounded, and her trust broken too many times. The human offered her water from a strange metal flask. She stared at it, hesitant, but the burning thirst inside her forced her hand. The liquid was cool, pure, unlike anything she had tasted in the desert. It flowed into her veins like life itself. For the first time since her exile, she felt the strength return to her body. "Why are you here?" she finally asked, her voice low and sharp. The human did not answer at once. He studied the horizon, eyes scanning for danger. At last he said, "I came searching for something. Maybe for someone." His words were simple, but there was weight behind them, a weight she could not yet understand. They walked together in silence. Her mind burned with doubts. Humans were not meant to be on her world, or so she had been told. Her stepmother had spoken of them as intruders, wanderers from distant stars, dangerous and selfish. But the man who saved her did not look like a monster. He looked tired, scarred, but not cruel. When night fell, the twin moons painted the sands in pale silver. The princess built a small fire using crystal shards that sparked when struck. The human watched, curious, as if learning something new. Around the fire, the shadows of the wasteland came alive. The growls of unseen beasts echoed, and the ground shivered with their movements. She held her crystal shard close, her only weapon. The human rested his strange blade across his knees, its surface glowing faintly. For a long time neither spoke. At last, he broke the silence. "You're not just anyone," he said, his eyes sharp. "You carry yourself like royalty, but you hide like prey." Her heart skipped, rage flaring in her chest. She wanted to deny it, to keep her secret safe, but the firelight betrayed her, reflecting the crest burned into her arm, the royal mark she could never erase. He saw it, and in his gaze there was no mockery, no scorn, only recognition. "You're the princess," he whispered, not as a question but as truth. Her lips trembled, but she lifted her chin. Defiant, "I was the princess," she spat. "Now, I am nothing, cast aside, flawed." Her words cut like a blade, sharp and bitter. The human did not flinch. He simply nodded, as if her pain was something he understood. "You survived," he said. "That does not sound flawed to me." The simple sentence pierced through her armor of anger. No one had spoken to her like that, not since her father lived. Her stepmother's voice had poisoned her ears for so long that she almost forgot what kindness sounded like. The fire burned low, and the night grew colder. The princess closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling her into uneasy sleep. But the human did not rest. He kept watch, scanning the dunes, listening to the cries of creatures that crept ever closer. When one dared to approach, he rose, swift and silent, driving it away, before she even stirred. By morning, the desert seemed less endless. The princess woke to find fresh tracks in the sand, large clawed prints circling their camp. She shivered, realizing that if she had been alone, she would not have survived the night. The human caught her gaze and said nothing, but in the silence, she understood her life had been spared twice now, once by his blade, and once by his vigilance. As they walked again, she dared to ask, "What is your name?" The man paused, his face unreadable. "Daniel," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of untold stories. The name felt strange on her tongue, human yet solid. She whispered it once, softly, as if testing its strength. Daniel studied her as they walked. He saw the fire in her eyes, the resilience in her steps. She was not weak, not broken, only hidden beneath scars of betrayal. He wondered why her own people had abandoned her, and though she had not yet told him, he felt deep inside that she was meant for something greater. By the third day of their journey, the sands began to shift. Mountains of crystal loomed ahead. jagged and glowing with inner fire. The princess froze, recognition flashing in her eyes. "This is Forbidden's land," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel raised a brow. "Forbidden's by who?" "By the throne," she answered. "By my stepmother." He smirked faintly, eyes narrowing at the horizon. "Then maybe this is exactly where we need to go," he said. She stared at him, torn between fear and hope, and as the wind howled through the crystal peaks, she realized something. Her exile was no longer just survival. It was the beginning of a journey that might change everything. The crystal mountains rose like blades toward the skies, their jagged peaks glowing faintly under the twin suns. Every step echoed against the hard ground, the sound bouncing through hollow ridges as if the land itself whispered secrets. Princess walked with Daniel close behind, her body tired, but her spirit awake. She felt the air thicken, charged with energy, as though the crystals were alive, watching her, judging her. Daniel's eyes scanned the surroundings, sharp and cautious. He had fought in strange places before, on worlds filled with danger, but this land felt different. It carried a pulse, a hidden rhythm that tugged at his senses. The princess noticed his unease, and for the first time, she spoke not as someone broken, but as someone who carried knowledge. "These crystals are not just stone," she said, her voice low. "They remember, they see. They hold power older than the throne itself." Daniel frowned, gripping his weapon a little tighter. "Power is never without a cost," he muttered, his soldier's instinct mistrusting anything that felt unnatural. But she only smiled faintly, as if his words confirmed something she already believed. As night approached, they found a hollow cave within the mountains. The walls shimmered faintly, glowing like stars frozen in crystal. The princess sat by the entrance, her eyes reflecting the light. Daniel, ever cautious, began preparing a small barrier of stones and shards, making sure nothing could sneak in. For a long time, silence stretched between them. She wanted to speak, to ask about his world, about the scars on his hands, about the battles carved into his face, but pride kept her quiet. He too wanted to ask about her exile, about the sorrow in her eyes that no strength could hide, but restraint held his tongue. When the fire crackled low, she finally broke the silence. "Why did you save Emmy?" she asked, her tone sharp, almost accusing. Daniel looked up from sharpening his blade, his expression calm. "Because you were worth saving," he answered simply, her heart stilled at the words, the simplicity of them striking harder than any speech of pity or flattery. She turned away, hiding her face in the dim glow. Her stepmother's voice echoed in her mind, flawed, unworthy, cursed. But Daniel's words cut through that poison like light in the darkness. "Worth saving," he had said, not because of her blood, not because of her title, but because of her. That night, when sleep finally came, she dreamt not of shadows chasing her, but of wings lifting her above them, and when she woke, she found Daniel still awake, keeping watch, his blade across his lap. For the first time, she did not feel like prey in the wastelands. She felt like someone who had a guardian. The days that followed carved a rhythm into their journey. He taught her to fight with precision, showing her how to hold her shard like a blade. Her movements were clumsy at first, but she learned quickly, her strikes sharper with each attempt. Daniel corrected her without mockery, his patience steady, his guidance firm. In return, she taught him the ways of her land, the signs in the sand, the cries of distant beasts, the safe cracks where water could be found. One evening, as they trained beneath the twin suns, she struck with more force than before. Daniel caught her strike with ease, twisting it aside, but the spark in her eyes made him pause. "You're not just surviving anymore," he said, breathing heavily. "You're fighting." Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. The first true smile since her exile. Trust began to form, fragile but real. It grew in small moments when she shared the last of her food with him, when he shielded her from falling crystal shards, when they laughed briefly at the clumsy stumble of a desert beast. Moments like threads, weaving something neither of them had expected. But with trust came danger. On the fourth night in the mountains, the sound of footsteps echoed in the dark, not beasts, not the shifting sands, but armored steps, deliberate and heavy. Daniel's hand flew to his weapon, and the princess froze, her blood turning cold. She knew those steps. She had heard them before in the royal halls. Hunters. The firelight flickered against the walls, revealing shapes moving at the mouth of the cave. Her stepmother's assassins had found them, their eyes glowing beneath metallic masks, weapons drawn. The princess's heart raced, panic clawing at her chest. But before she could speak, Daniel stepped forward, standing tall, his voice calm. "Stay behind me," he said, his tone carrying a command that even she could not refuse. The assassins lunged, and the cave filled with the clash of steel and crystal. Daniel fought like a storm, his blade cutting arcs of light through the dark. The princess gripped her shard, her body trembling, but she forced herself to stand, forced herself to fight. Together they held the line, two against many, and though blood was spilled and danger loomed, when the dust finally settled, they still stood, side by side, breathing heavily, alive, in that moment. As the silence returned, the bond between them deepened. Not just survivor and savior, not just princess and soldier, but something stronger, forged in fire, sharpened in battle, and bound by the unspoken truth that they needed each other. For in this world of betrayal and exile, they had found the rarest of things, trust. The night after the battle was heavy with silence. The princess and Daniel had survived, but the weight of danger pressed on their shoulders like a shadow that refused to leave. The bodies of the hunters lay half buried in the sand outside the cave, their glowing masks dim, their weapons broken. For the first time, the princess realized something terrifying. Her stepmother would never stop. As long as she lived, the queen's wrath would follow her. Daniel cleaned his blade in silence, his face unreadable. The princess sat near the fire, her hands trembling though she tried to hide it. She hated that her fear showed, hated that Daniel might see weakness in her eyes. But when he looked at her, there was no judgment, only quiet strength. It was almost enough to calm the storm inside her chest. They decided to move at dawn, deeper into the crystal mountains. The air grew colder, the light dimmer, as if the land itself was warning them. Yet something inside the princess pulled her forward, a whisper she could not ignore, a strange call that grew louder with every step. Daniel noticed the way her eyes drifted, the way her steps quickened. "You know this place," he said, his tone half a question. She hesitated, then nodded. "It is a place I was never meant to see." By the third day of climbing, they found ruins carved into the stone, ancient walls etched with alien symbols, glowing faintly like veins of light. The princess touched the markings, her fingers trembling. Memories stirred inside her, though she could not explain them. Daniel stood guard, scanning the silent cliffs above, his instincts warning him of unseen eyes. That night, as they rested among the ruins, they were not alone. A figure approached, cloaked in shadows, moving with quiet steps. The princess rose, her shard in hand, but when the figure lowered the hood, she froze. It was a face she knew, a servant from the royal court, one who had once shown her kindness in the palace. Her heart leapt, a spark of hope breaking through the cold walls she had built around herself. "You are alive," the servant whispered, kneeling before her. Tears burned her eyes as she stepped forward, gripping his shoulders. For so long she had believed she had no one left, no friend, no ally, and now here he was, risking his life to find her. Daniel, however, did not lower his guard. His eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on his blade. Trust was not so easily given to him, and the servant's sudden appearance was too convenient. But the princess's heart longed for connection. She listened as the servant spoke of rebellion stirring in secret, of people who still believed in her bloodline. He claimed the stepmother's rule was breaking the kingdom, that only she could bring hope. Her chest filled with fire at the thought. After all the pain, after all the exile, maybe she was not alone. Maybe she was still meant for something more. Daniel pulled her aside when the servant slept, his voice low and sharp. "Be careful," he warned. "Too much trust can be a blade at your back." She bristled, anger flashing in her eyes. "He is loyal," she snapped. "He risked everything to come here." Daniel said nothing more, but his silence was heavier than words. The following night, the trail revealed its face. As they rested in the ruins, the servant slipped away. Daniel woke first. Sensing the shift in the air, he followed the faint sound of footsteps, his body tense, his blade ready. And what he found made his blood run cold. The servant knelt before armored hunters at the mouth of the ruins. His voice was eager, desperate. "They are inside. The human is strong. But the princess is weak. Take her, and the queen will reward us all." Daniel's jaw tightened, his hand gripping the hilt of his blade until his knuckles turned white. He felt the sting of truth, the very betrayal he had warned her about. When the hunters stormed the ruins, the princess woke to chaos. Steel clashed against stone. Fire burst from the crystals. Daniel fought like a storm unleashed, his blade carving arcs of light. But the hunters came in waves, striking with precision. The princess stumbled, torn between fear and rage. And then she saw him, the servant, standing among the hunters. His eyes filled with greed, her heart shattered. The hope she had clung to crumbling into ash. The fight was brutal, and Daniel took blow after blow to shield her. His armor cracked, blood staining the ground beneath his feet. Still he stood, still he fought, as if his very existence depended on her survival. At last, the hunters were forced back, retreating into the shadows with curses and promises to return. The ruins fell silent once more. The princess knelt beside Daniel, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the blood from his wounds. Tears blurred her vision, anger and guilt burning inside her. He had been right. The betrayal had come, and it was her fault for not seeing it. But as Daniel's weak hand gripped hers, his voice rasping through pain, he whispered, "Do not break. Because of one traitor. You are stronger than this." Her heart ached at his words, but they lit a fire inside her. She realized now that trust could destroy, but it could also build something unshakable. And she knew then, as she held his hand, that she would not let him fall. Not here, not now, not ever. The ruins were quiet after the battle. But silence did not bring peace. The princess knelt beside Daniel, her hands pressing against his wounds, the sharp scent of blood filling the air. He winced but did not fall, his eyes locked on hers with a steady fire. "You have to move," he whispered. "They will return." But she shook her head fiercely, tears streaking her face. "Not without you." They stayed in the ruins for 2 days, hidden among the broken stones. The princess searched the cracks of the mountains for herbs that might heal, grinding them into a paste with her shard. Daniel endured the pain without complaint, though his breath came heavy. Every night he insisted on keeping watch, even wounded. And every night she forced him to rest. For the first time she cared. Not for survival alone, but for him. On the third morning, as the suns rose, the crystals within the ruins began to glow brighter. The princess touched the walls, her fingers trembling as strange warmth spread through her skin. The markings she had seen before now shifted, alive, their lights spilling like rivers across the stone. Her breath caught in her throat, as images formed before her eyes. A vision of fire, a crown, a broken world, and a figure standing tall with light in her hands. Daniel stirred beside her, his voice low. "What is it?" She could hardly speak, her heart racing. "These ruins. They are not ruins. They are alive," she whispered. Her fingers traced the symbols, and they answered her touch, pulsing brighter. The old song spoke of a chosen one, born flawed, but carrying the strength of 2 worlds. She closed her eyes, the words flowing like memory, though she had never learned them. Daniel pushed himself up despite his wounds, his gaze sharp. "And you think that is you?" he said, not as doubt, but as recognition. Her lips trembled, her pride resisting the truth, but the light from the crystals bathed her in fire, painting her face like a crown, and in her heart she knew. Her so-called flaw was not weakness, it was power unseen by those who feared it. The mark on her skin was no curse, but a sign left by the ancients. Her stepmother had cast her aside, because she feared the truth. The throne had lied, and the kingdom had followed the lie. But here, in the heart of Forbidden's land, the truth rose like the twin suns. She was not broken, she was chosen. As the visions faded, her knees buckled, and Daniel caught her, his arms strong even through pain, holding her steady. "You don't have to carry it alone," he said quietly. His words struck deep. A promise stronger than any oath she had known. For the first time she believed him, truly believed. They spent the next days exploring the ruins. Hidden chambers revealed weapons of light, ancient armor that hummed with strange energy. The princess touched one of the relics, and it awakened, shaping itself to her body. A crown of crystal unfolded upon her brow, glowing faintly. Daniel watched with a mix of awe and wariness. "Power like this," he muttered. "It changes everything." But the princess smiled, not with arrogance, but with resolve. "This is not for me alone," she said, her voice strong. "It is for my people, for the kingdom that suffers under her rule." Daniel studied her, the fire in her eyes brighter than the crystals themselves. He had seen leaders before, soldiers, kings, commanders, but he had never seen someone rise from exile into destiny. That night, the ruins sang, the crystals hummed with deep sound, vibrating through the earth. Daniel and the princess stood together as the light formed a path ahead, a map carved in glowing symbols leading deeper into the mountains. Her breath caught, realizing it was not just prophecy, it was guidance. The ancients were calling her to finish what they had begun. But beyond the glow, shadows gathered. Daniel sensed them first, his soldier's instinct prickling. He gripped his blade, scanning the darkness. The hunters had not returned yet, but he knew they would. And worse, he feared the queen herself would soon rise from her throne to crush what she could not control. The princess placed her hand over his, steadying him. "We will face them," she said firmly. Her voice no longer carried the doubt of exile, no longer the bitterness of betrayal. It carried purpose, fire, an unshakable will. And Daniel, though battered and scarred, nodded with quiet trust. For in her eyes he saw not the frightened girl he had saved, but the leader who might change a world. In that moment, in the ruins of the ancients, the truth became clear. She was not flawed. She was chosen, and together they would walk a path that no queen, no army, no throne could ever erase. Asterisk. The path shown by the crystals led them deeper into the mountains. Every step echoed with destiny, the walls glowing faintly as if guiding her forward. The princess walked with Daniel beside her, her stride stronger now, her heart steadier. The fear that once clung to her like chains was gone, replaced by fire. At the heart of the mountains, they found a hidden chamber. Inside were voices, whispers of the ancients, their words carved into light. They spoke not with sound, but with feeling flowing into her mind. "Rise, child of flaw, for your bloodline feared what it could not control." Her breath trembled, but she did not bow. She stood tall, embracing the words. Daniel watched silently, his hand always near his blade. He did not understand the voices, but he understood her. He saw the way her back straightened, the way her eyes burned with purpose. This was not the fragile exile he had met in the sands. This was a leader, shaped by pain, hardened by betrayal, ready for war. When they left the chamber, the mountains opened into a valley. There, hidden from the throne, lived the scattered exiles and rebels of her people, men and women who had lost everything to the queen's rule. They stared in silence as the princess walked among them. Some whispered her name with fear, others with awe. One old warrior stepped forward, his armor cracked, his eyes weary. "We heard you were dead," he said, his voice heavy. She lifted her chin, her voice firm. "I was left to die, but death did not claim me." The crowd stirred, their silence breaking into murmurs. Her words carried truth, not born of throne or crown, but of survival. Daniel stepped beside her, his presence like a shield. He saw their doubt, the suspicion in their eyes, but he also saw the spark, the small flame of hope that had long been buried. "Your queen calls her flawed," he said, his voice sharp and clear. "But I have fought beside her, I have bled beside her. And I tell you this, there is no one stronger than her." The valley roared with voices, doubt turning to belief. For the first time, they saw not a broken princess, but a warrior rising from exile, and so began the gathering of the uprising. Rebels forged weapons from crystal shards, armor from the bones of fallen beasts. The princess trained beside them, teaching, fighting, bleeding with them. She was not above them, she was among them. Daniel drilled the fighters with soldiers' discipline, his methods sharp, his words few but powerful. The rebels learned to fight in unison, their strikes precise, their shields firm. Together, human and alien stood as one, bound not by blood, but by purpose. But the queen learned of their movement. Her spies carried whispers back to the throne, and she laughed in her halls, her voice cruel. "She thinks herself chosen? Then let her lead her broken flock to slaughter." She sent her generals with armies of steel, hunters trained to kill without mercy. The first clash came in the valley. The rebels stood upon the cliffs, the princess at their front, her shard glowing like fire. Daniel raised his blade, his voice cutting through the roar of the enemy. "Hold the line," he commanded. The ground shook as the queen's forces charged, their weapons blazing, but the rebels did not falter. Not this time. The battle was chaos, fire and steel, screams and thunder. The princess fought like a storm, every strike of her shard unleashing light from the crystals around her. Daniel fought beside her, cutting through armored hunters, his movements sharp and deadly. The rebels, once broken and afraid, now roared with courage, their voices shaking the mountains. When the dust settled, the valley still stood. The queen's forces had been broken, their banners burned. The rebels cheered, lifting their weapons to the skies. For the first time, victory was theirs, but the princess did not smile. She stood in the silence of the battlefield, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She knew this was only the beginning. Her stepmother would not stop. The queen would come herself, and when she did, it would not be for battle alone, it would be for the throne. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and sure. "You lit the fire," he said. "Now you must carry it." Her chest tightened, but she nodded. She was no longer the exile, no longer the forgotten. She was the flame of rebellion, the bond of two worlds, and soon she would face the storm that waited on the throne. The valley still carried the scent of smoke, but the fire of victory burned brighter than fear. The rebels cheered her name, their voices echoing against the crystal peaks. But the princess did not rest, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the throne still stood. She knew her stepmother would come, not with whispers, not with hunters, but with her own hand. Days later, the sky itself darkened. The queen arrived with an army vast as the desert, banners black, weapons glowing with cruel fire. At her side marched beasts bred for war, armored and bound by chains, their roars shaking the ground. And at the center of it all rode the queen, her crown of iron sharp as blades, her eyes filled with poison. The rebels trembled at the sight, their courage tested by the shadow of death. But the princess stood tall, her shard raised high, its light spilling across the cliffs. She spoke with fire, her voice carrying over the army. "They call me flawed, they cast me aside, but I rise not for a throne, not for a crown, but for all of you." Her words struck deep, and the rebels roared once more, their fear burning into rage. The battle began with thunder. Arrows of crystal flew across the skies, clashing against fire from the queen's weapons. The ground shook beneath the charge of beasts, their chains snapping as they lunged forward. Daniel led the front lines, his blade cutting arcs of light, his voice commanding the fighters with iron will. The princess struck at the beasts, her shard glowing brighter with every swing, her power no longer hidden but unleashed. The queen's army pressed hard, waves of steel and flame, many rebels fell, the valley shaking with screams and thunder. But the uprising did not break, for every fallen fighter gave rise to two more. And at the heart of the storm, the princes and Daniel carved a path forward. Step by bloody step, at last, the queen descended onto the battlefield. Her presence silenced even the chaos, her shadow stretching long. She raised her blade, black as night, its edge humming with cruel power, her eyes locked onto the princess. Filled with hate and fear, "So the mistake dares to stand," the queen hissed, her voice sharp as venom. "I will erase you myself." The duel began with a clash that shook the valley. Light against darkness, shard against steel. The queen struck with fury, every blow fueled by years of cruelty and greed. The princess met her strike for strike, her arms trembling but unbroken. Daniel fought to keep the queen's guards away, his body a wall of steel protecting her. But he knew this battle was hers alone. The queen's blade slashed, cutting deep across her arm, pain searing through her body. The princess staggered, but did not fall. She remembered the wastelands, the hunger, the fear, the shadow of beasts. She remembered betrayal, the wound of trust broken. She remembered Daniel's hand pulling her up, his words reminding her of worth. And with every memory, strength rose in her veins. "You feared me because you knew the truth," she said through clenched teeth. "I was never flawed, I was chosen." Her shard blazed with light, brighter than the sun's. The queen snarled, pressing harder, her blade striking down with killing force. But the princess caught it, holding the strike with both hands, her power surging through the crystal. The light exploded, shattering the queen's weapon into dust. The queen staggered back, her crown slipping, her eyes wide with disbelief. The princess lowered her shard but did not strike. Instead, she spoke with steady fire, her voice carrying to every soul on the battlefield. "Your rule ends not because I destroy you, but because your lies can no longer hold us." The queen screamed, lunging again, but the rebels surged forward, pulling her down, her throne shattered by her own people. The battlefield fell silent. The sun breaking through the clouds, the rebels dropped to their knees, not out of fear, but out of respect. The princess stood at the center, her shard glowing softly, no longer a weapon, but a symbol. Daniel approached, his armor scarred, his body weary, but his eyes steady. He placed his hand over his chest and bowed. "You did what they said you could not," he said, his voice rough but filled with pride. "You endured." Tears filled her eyes, not of sorrow, but of release. She looked at her people, no longer seeing fear, but hope. She looked at Daniel, no longer seeing a stranger, but the one who had believed when no one else did. Her exile had ended, her throne reclaimed not with cruelty, but with compassion. And her bond with the human had changed not only her fate, but the fate of a world. The uprising was over, but her story was only beginning.